Hello and welcome to IdeaGen TV. Today we have an incredible conversation for you. Being founded in 2017, Topl has built the very first blockchain designed for impact. They're building an impact technology economy that enables digital and sustainable transformation across value chains and empowers the monetization of impact verified on the Topl blockchain. Today we have with us the founder and CEO of Topl, Kim Raath. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Along with Samantha Lewis, the principal at the Mercury Fund, where she serves on the boards of Mercury Fund's portfolio companies, including Topl. Welcome, Samantha.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We are so excited to have you both here. You all have some very interesting things to say, and we would love to jump into that. To begin with, we would love if you could briefly describe your roles that you have. Why don't we start with Kim?
Yes, so as founder and CEO of Topl, obviously a lot of my role is very much making sure that Topl operates. But I have to say, like, one of the biggest things I do, and we can dive deeper into it later, is as we just talked about impact economy and building an impact economy. My role is very much helping us really strategically grow the whole Topl ecosystem that enables this impact economy on top of Topl's blockchain. And so, yes, obviously, I lead our strategic investment and other specific operations within the company.
Great. Thank you for that background. Now, Samantha, could you tell us a little bit about your roles?
Yeah, so I am a principal here at Mercury. I lead what we call the power theme, which is all about empowerment and empowering people. And so where I'm really focused, which is how I'm really connected with Topl, and Topl's story is actually how I came to be at Mercury, because I've been part of Topl's story since 2018, joined Mercury in 2020. But so I'm leading, like I said, what we call the power theme, and it's to invest in tools that create access for everyone, access to capital, access to opportunity, access to knowledge, and access to services. And so businesses and consumers are trying to keep up with this changing consumer behavior around purpose and profit and the marrying of the two. And so we invest in tools that are giving transparency into those decisions that we make every day on what we consume, who we work for, who we're buying from, what we're buying, what we're eating, etc. And so really excited to be here and continue the conversation with SDGs.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads me perfectly into our next point. At IdeaGen, we do heavily focus on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So can you both describe a few examples of how your work relates to the UN SDGs?
Yeah, so I can jump in first. So to give you guys some examples of things that are powered by the Topl blockchain, so you can actually, we've made it really easy for anything from a tracking platform or a tracing platform or a certification platform to essentially plug and play into our technology. And so we've seen everything from living wage certified coffee, moving from bean to brew, to ethically sourced diamonds traced from mines to marriage, to temperature validated COVID-19 test kits that are moving from test tube to the test kit, and actually most recently like carbon neutral energy practices from wells to warmth. And so to kind of dive deep into that, like just looking at those examples, one of the biggest things was one of these mines was, okay, so we're tracking these diamonds from source to sell, but these diamonds also are, these diamond mines are rehabilitating the land. So this is, this comes to SDG 12 and 15. So what they're actually doing is, because these diamond mines are actually alluvial mines, so they're these surface level mines, they're not deep pit mines. I'm actually from a diamond mining family, so I apologize if I go into a lot of detail there. But it's really interesting because there are these surface level mines. When you rehabilitate that land, you can actually like plant pecan trees, or you can actually really take care of that land and restore that land much quicker than you would have been able in deep pit mine. So how do you actually differentiate that stone that moved from mine to marriage that was tracked out of this specific mine? And that's where Topl comes in. We help companies essentially track that physical asset, but then also that environmental attribute. So that unique stone now is differentiated. And so you can think about it having a birth certificate, and that birth certificate has this ESG tag, this sustainable development goal that it has achieved, where it is a more environmental friendly diamond. And then there's a bunch of other ones too, like the fact that they're conflict free, the fact that you actually know that they're conflict free because you actually got to see the full provenance, the full journey of that stone. So that's one of these examples. And then obviously I mentioned living wage farming, and that also applies to a bunch of the other SDGs that we've seen, SDG 3, SDG 8. So a lot of what we do at Topl is really much the cornerstone of what we do. Was our inception was built off of the UN SDGs. When we started this journey, it was all about how can we take these impact measures and have people that are truly changing the world prove that they're changing the world. So really being able to measure and essentially tag their activities that are changing the world with the associated ESG or SDG impact that they're making, so that they can, at the end of the value chain, can prove and show these certificates that show all these different value adds or impact measures that they have created throughout their value chains. And so those are some of the examples of how our work has been impacted and also has impacted the actual execution of the SDGs, because this is all about like being able to measure them, and so that we can achieve them by 2030. So how do we truly achieve them? We need to start actually measuring them. We need to start being able to capture information on them. And so that's kind of been the Topl journey. And there's a bunch of others we can talk about, especially on the climate side. As we, being in Houston, we are very involved in the energy transition. And one of the biggest things we've been doing lately is really helping not just companies do carbon sequestration and being able to track their carbon credits and showing that they're not double spending some of these carbon credits, but also carbon intensity measuring. So how many, a lot of these energy companies are coming under fire for not being emitting so many emissions. And so how do they show that they've reduced that emission footprint? And that's where we also come in. We help them track that part of it.
Yeah, that's truly incredible. I mean, you said it when you began, but you really do touch quite a lot. I mean, life on land, I heard, decent work and economic growth, responsible consumption and production, and I'm sure the list goes on. It's fascinating to think about the fact that, we see a lot of these end products. You said coffee beans, diamonds in particular. We see these end products and we might not necessarily know where they come from. And that's almost as important as the end product itself, is how did it get into the store? How did it get to the consumer? Was it done responsibly? Was it done sustainably? And so it's an incredible mission, and I'm fascinated, and I'm excited to hear more about it as we go on. But switching over to Samantha, can you describe how does your work relate to the UN SDGs?
Yeah, so in the development of my theme, this power theme, I thought about what are the key things that, one, of course, drive value and drive opportunity and drive returns for our investors, but that are also doing good for the world. And so I use the SDGs. Topl really helped me think through a lot of this, actually. And so thank you, Kim, for being there along the way as I did it. But with the power theme, we're thinking about a lot of the same ones that Topl really captures. And Topl, some of our companies are very specific on capturing one. So that might be decent work and economic growth, for example. But Topl really can hit a lot of them. And so the way we think about it at Mercury is within all our themes, we tie them to SDGs. And then that's a piece of our diligence that goes into if we're going to invest in companies. And so we think about, we call it our ESG risk score, but it really is related to our company's purpose built. And if they are, we believe that they're going to be more successful. The data shows that companies that are purpose built and inclusive are more successful and have higher returns. And so it's just something that we've woven into our entire diligence process. Specifically to my theme, responsible consumption and production is a really important one. Reduced inequalities is key. I think there are ways now to build billion-dollar markets by reducing inequalities. Technology gives us the means and the tools to be able to do that. And so it's really exciting from the VC perspective that we can actually be doing good for the world and at the same time creating a lot of economic value. And so these two merging together, I think is key. And I think that gives VCs, those of us that do focus on it, a key competitive advantage in a world where there is a lot of capital floating around and going to technology startups.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I liked what you said, doing good for the world and creating a lot of economic value, because I think those don't necessarily go hand in hand when you think about it. But it's absolutely true that it is 100% accomplishable. And what I'm loving about this conversation is that we're seeing, the tracking on the ground, whether that's in the mines or the farms from Topl. But it's just as important to have partners who support that mission to make that come to fruition. And so that's absolutely fascinating. And, going along this journey, I'm sure that both of you have come into many challenges that you faced. And so could you describe a couple of the challenges that you faced, and then how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think I can kick this one off, and then Kim has a lot to say, I think, around it as well, and it's something we talk about often. But the challenge that I experience a lot, especially as I'm talking about the themes, especially as I'm talking about the startups that I want to be investing in, are really trying to make sure people aren't separating purpose and profit in their mind. So I use a lot of data to back that up. So for example, purpose-driven companies grow 3 times faster than competitors. They have higher retention rates, both for customers and for employees, and they drive higher returns. And so having a purpose-built company is good for business. So there is this true economic case for impact. And I think in the investing world, oftentimes people get worried about the word impact, or they get worried about the purpose-built or whatever it might be. And they think that means you have to sacrifice profit. But truly, I think the way that we've overcome a lot of those initial reactions is by just providing people with the data. It's well known that diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams, but that's not just because of the different perspectives. It's truly because there's a lower risk associated with diverse teams because of how they incorporate purpose and impact into every single thing they do. And so the different perspectives add to that. But it's really important for us just to think about the companies who are weaving that into their day-to-day operations and then investing in those companies, because we truly believe that's where the highest returns are going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Show them the data. I like that, because you can't argue with it.
Right.
Kim, can you describe, what challenges you faced and then how you've overcome them at Topl?
Yeah, so I mean, to kind of piggyback off of what Sam was saying there, when it comes to, when purpose meets profit, I always say that, when startups come about, they want to be unicorns, but Topl's seeking to essentially, on this impact economy that we're building, is to grow a herd of zebras. Now, what I mean by that is companies that are both committed to, doing good and improving society. So purpose and profit, so white and black. So being able to actually have those stripes. So thinking through this, I think a lot of this has been, the challenges I've seen is when we're solving problems of inequality, if we're solving problems of poverty or climate change or any one of these, things, we think it's the responsibility, as we said, of governments or nonprofits. And it's divorced from business and the consumer, as Sam pointed out. But modern consumers see this connection, as you mentioned earlier, John, is that it is, good to be a responsible purchaser. So if, we can have ethical businesses become more efficient and profitable, not only will their individual capacity change and have an increased impact, but competitors in the larger market will also be incentivized to address these social changes. So with that, I always say, even though unicorns are focused on disruption, zebras have the power to essentially change the commerce status quo. Like we can force, or essentially these companies can force responsibility for impacts that we are generating, and we can become contributing members to the communities that we profit from, right? Like how do we actually do that? And so at Topl, we truly do believe that economic and social goals need to be complementary instead of competitive. And that's kind of where, profit drives purpose and drives impact. Topl actually has a new show that we just launched, a supply chain show of, People, Planet, Profit with Topl, where we talk about different groups in especially this topic. We have it's a podcast where we have customers join us, or new or potential customers join us, and we talk about this mission. And so one of the biggest things that I also agree with Sam that we can do as a company is also drive that diversity, because there's the only way you become this disruptive, or you try and like actually change the commerce status quo, or just change the status quo. We have to drive diversity. So in our team, for instance, I obviously, as you guys know, have met Samantha Lewis. She's on our board. We actually have a minority majority board. And at the same time, my team, we speak about 13 different languages. We come from about 10 different countries. We're about 24 now. And we literally, and obviously we're about 30% female, but it's all about that piece of it. Is I wanted people to join this team that actually come from these communities, that have lived and breathed the problem spaces that we're solving, that can be able to help solve and build this technology because they've experienced, or their families have experienced, some of the issues and some of the problems that we're solving. So I think it is really important to drive, that diversity in your team, but also diversity of thought for people around you. However, this is a big challenge because of what we had talked about earlier, is that there is a divorce still, and people need to, it's a mind shift that has to happen, and we have to be a part of that shift.
Yeah, just to jump in real quick and add something additional to what Kim is saying. There's a study out by McKinsey that says there's now evidence that a better ESG score translates to a 10% lower cost of capital. And everything Kim just explained is exactly aligned with that, right? It's not just hiring someone so that you have a check mark. It's actually part of weaving that into everything that they're doing, and that truly creates a lower risk environment for investors.
No, yeah, I mean, absolutely. It certainly sounds like you're not only wanting to do good, but you're filling it with people who are good, on the ground individuals who have, faced those challenges and things like that. And so, again, touching upon many SDGs here, and it's wonderful. And I like the fact that, Samantha, you were familiar with Topl before you had joined the Mercury Fund. And so that leads me into my next question, which is, what is the role of partnerships and collaboration in accomplishing the work we're trying to achieve and ultimately meeting, the SDGs? And to go a step further, what makes a good partner? You guys seem like you have some great chemistry, so I would love to hear, what makes a good partner?
Yes, well, we have worked together very closely for 4 years now. And so Kim and I have become very close. And honestly, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Kim. And so I can speak to a personal partnership that really has helped me get to where I am, and I know has helped Kim get to where she is too. And then I can let Kim, and then Kim can jump in and talk about some of the partnerships Topl's doing on a bigger scale. But really, when Kim and I first met, what we really bonded over was the true impact-driven company, and that in doing good for the world can also create a very, very successful economic outcome for investors. And so I really started to explore impact and the impact economy because of Kim. And so now I am where I am 4 years later. I joined Mercury in large part because Mercury was leading Topl's seed round. And I was already on the Topl board. I was already part of Topl. I got to know Mercury. And what I really saw was Mercury does have a really open mind and is willing to constantly be learning about the underrepresented entrepreneur. And so that's part of the diversity piece of it. But really about the impact that what we do has impact. And how are we making sure that impact is aligned with the SDGs? And so Kim, I will give Kim all the credit here. She really helped me think through and get to that point in my career to where now I'm able to deploy capital into the companies that are aligned with SDGs and impact.
That's incredible. That's incredible, and I love that insight. So Kim, now can we hear about some of the partnerships and collaborations that Topl has, and that help you achieve your goals as an organization?
Yes, I do want to start it with, like, yes, I agree with them. I would not be where I am without her. So I think it's a mutual relationship here. And she also keeps me on my toes to make sure that we're still driving, a solid business forward. I always said we might seem fluffy on the outside, but we're extremely solid on the inside. And when it comes to like partnerships, I think that one of the biggest things, and even in the space we're in, the blockchain space itself, and we touched on this a little bit earlier about like building an impact economy, right? You can't build this like economy without building ecosystem, right? And so one of the biggest things that we're focused on, and I mentioned like one of my biggest responsibilities at Topl is to think through this ecosystem. It is to think through this like future of what Topl looks like when we're 5 years from now. What does that need to look like? What does the economy on top of our technology need to look like for us to truly grow to the scale that we'd like to grow to? And to kind of use some of these examples is, I always talk about like, what if we can get to a point, it's not just about tracking, for instance, like living wage farming, it's about empowering that farmer again, right? So it's all about like saying, okay, so that history was tracked, but how can that farmer now leverage that history? Like, how can that farmer now actually create the alternative credit score for themselves? Because for the first time, they have this self-certified, defensible, self-certified history of their success. Or how can you actually take a carbon credit from its source or a sequestered, even in these farming situations, these remote farmers, could they be rewarded? Could they receive, money for the carbon credits and the actual like agroforestry that they might be creating at source? So it's about building this economy where you have this full ecosystem of players all the way from start to finish. So one of the biggest things I do is I spend a lot of time with big thinkers, and I'll name a few. Joe Madden from Expansive, one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my life, that really just thinks about ESG commodities at the next level. And then there's Chris Hale from Countable. They think about actual, tracking the SDGs alongside development finance projects as they move into developing markets on a completely different level of like, how are you able to actually prove milestones of development finance projects? So all these different partners that we've started bringing into the Topl ecosystem, there's a very big like mind melding of like, we all have a similar mission and a core mission to be these like social activists. So we all are, championing social change, and we are social entrepreneurs by default. And I think that's one of the biggest things about like building partnerships, and what makes a good partner is that like mission driven alignment that we've seen. And then it's about going further for us as a technology provider. It's all about saying, how do I make my blockchain boring so that they can access it as easy as possible, so that their lives can be better? Topl's slogan is, you change the world, we'll help you prove it. But for us to do that, we need to make the technology as streamlined as possible. And a lot of the space that we're in is not as inclusive. So it's not necessarily building the necessary tools to make blockchain easy to use and really like benefit the people that should like that are being impacted the most and need this the most. So I think those are some of the things that we've been focused on. As we always talk about, like, Topl is a very inclusive blockchain in the sense that we've literally gone further and said, okay, how do we build the necessary tools for existing tech to plug in? How can a farmer, like I just talked about, use their phone, like SMS, to actually interact and be able to participate in this network? So it's all about saying, how do we connect the most disenfranchised individual with the biggest organization on the other side, but all through the same censorship-proof network, so that data can be democratized and there can truly be this like trustless transparency for everyone using this technology. So ultimately, I think it's the ecosystem building is a big part of what we do every day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know what I've loved about this conversation is we've seen, from Topl, where it's working on the ground, and Mercury Fund on the corporate level. Again, that mission alignment that you've discussed, because I think that that is so essential to one achieving the UN SDGs, and then achieving the great work that companies like Topl and the great funding like Mercury Fund can do. Is that mission alignment, because it's not a one person one goal. It's everybody working towards something. And so it's incredible to hear the work, having from both sides of the aisle there. And so moving to my next question, what is your advice for others in this area, whether that's, corporate funding from Mercury funds or working on the ground from Topl?
Yes, I think like one of the biggest things that I kind of touched on it from a being a social advocate and actually being an activist in what we do. It's a really tough time to really think through, like, how do you go from being someone interested in social change to becoming an activist for that social change to becoming an entrepreneur in this journey. And I just want to say to everyone the same thing I said earlier, is that I truly believe that social goals and economic goals can be complementary, and that we together, if more of us are actually working towards, to drive impact, I think we can absolutely get to the next level. I think there is a really big part of this of, building a world where purpose-driven businesses can maximize their profit and their impact at the same time. So like I said, if you're changing the world, let's help you prove it, but you can do both at the same time. So I want to encourage people to really believe that that is possible. We are one of the data points that are doing it, but I do want people to not get discouraged. And I want more zebras to be out there.
I love that. More zebras. No, absolutely. I mean, having social change and economic change, I think we've seen it's not a if, but we need it. It's absolutely essential nowadays, and going forward with our future, in sustainability in general. So Samantha, what advice do you have for others in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I always say to every investor is the data shows that every investor should be an impact investor, right? Like that truly relates to the lower cost of capital, the 10% lower cost of capital that I referenced earlier, but it also relates to higher returns. And so the way that we have to continue to get that message out there so that the capital providers are really starting to apply an impact ESG, SDG lens to what they're doing, is just continue to arm ourselves with data. So there's another really good data point that I throw out all the time when I talk to investors, that institutional investors that applied ESG practices to at least a quarter of their portfolios, their value jumped from 48% return to 75% return in just 1 year. And so being able to use data like that to convince and to show people that having an impact mindset is truly good for business, that is the economic case for impact, is going to put more capital into the companies like Topl that are truly changing the world, but they're also doing what we need in a capitalist society, which is make money. And so being able to convince and show people with data that those two are not separate, I think is one of the biggest hurdles, but also one of the most important things that those of us that get it and understand that continue to shout from the rooftops.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely incredible to hear from both of you. And I think that, even if you're an informed consumer, or if you're an informed funder, capitalist, whatever it may be, these are the reasons. You have the data, you have the proof to show that, listen, it's working, it will continue to work. And not only will it continue to work, we need it to work. And so I thank you both for the work that you're doing and for the incredible conversation we've had here today. And to wrap things up, I'd love to hear what is your call to action for our global audience members?
Yeah, for me, it is one of those things. I'm always going to be, a businesswoman. Is if there are companies out there and you want to essentially, you're changing the world and you need us to help you prove it, please reach out. We'd love that. And go to our website, and also you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think those are the biggest pieces for me, and we're excited. Like, follow us in these. We love the community around the mission, and anyone can join the mission of Topl. It's not just those that work here and those that use our technology. It's about, as Sam said, we need everyone to pull together.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Samantha, what is your call to action?
If you are a startup or know startups who are building for purpose and profit, I want to hear from them. And so if you are a digital technology and you are doing something that is good for the world and there's a massive business case for it, I want to hear from you.
Well, there you have it. Two incredible women leaders leading in strides in zebra packs, as you may, for sustainability and for our planet. Thank you both for joining us today. Kim Raath, the founder and CEO of Topl, and Samantha Lewis, principal at Mercury Fund. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.